This is how this carpet's been made for years, and I'm not happy with this. I don't like how this does this. MG Raw back with you, and today we're back on the 60 MGA, and we're going to start putting the interior in it. Now, this is not intended to be a detailed how-to. It's more going to be an overview because I'm on a time schedule. I want to get this thing done. I don't want to spend that much time trying to film everything for this. We need to get it done. Yeah, I went ahead and plugged all these holes from where the previous owner had misdrilled the holes. Now, hands up. Who knew I was going to do that? Yeah, I knew I would. It's just a matter of making sure I didn't convince myself not to. But at any rate, I also plugged all these original holes here that were drilled in these floors from when they showed up to when the owner bought them. These floors over the years, at one time they used to come with the T-nuts already in them. And then they started coming pre-drilled like this, but without the T-nuts in them. Now the last set I purchased for a buddy of mine didn't have any holes at all in them. But here's the problem we have with today's parts anymore. See where these holes were drilled? Here. Well, this is where they should be here based on the drawings we got from Moss Motors. Now, one thing we'll notice is the holes on this side weren't even in the same place as this side were. There was like a ½ inch difference between where they were from the back edge forward on the two sides and a little bit on side to side. So I plugged everything, I remarked them. I got pilots drilled here right now for where the seat goes. And then I've got everything marked up here where the lift-a-dot studs go, according to those same drawings. Now, where I like to do is start with, of course, the insulating padding underneath. It's where you always want to start. So we need to get that in there first, and since this is a 1600 with the high mount starter, that mat does not come with the hole to go around this. So we've got to lay that in there, figure out where that is, and cut that out of the mat. All right, so what we started out here is playing with our sound deadening material that comes with the carpet kit. So I get it laid in here and start out lining it up even on the rail here, and then work it forward and trim it around the starter cover and the throttle bracket and stuff like that. Do both sides and the middle piece here, get all that, because it's going to take some trimming. It's not going to fit right out of the box exactly right. But also, we want to make sure we're ahead of the bolts for the seat frames far enough that it'll stay in front of the seat tracks. You don't want this under the edge of the seat tracks, because that can make the tracks warp just slightly and make them hard to slide. So what we found out was, from side to side, these weren't cut exactly the same. So one was a lot closer to the seat than the other was, and then it didn't go quite as high on the firewall. So we just trimmed them both to be ahead of the seat brackets and in the same height at the firewall. So now when gluing this stuff, it's pretty tempting just to glue the whole thing all at once and try to slap it in there. If you do that, you're going to have some difficulties. You want to think about how you're gluing this, because you're dealing with contact cement. And the better glue you're using, the better it's going to stay in place. But the better glue you're using, the less you can play around and adjust things. Once it sticks, it's stuck. And we're using some pretty good glue here. So what I'm going to do here is basically use the frame rail here as a split point, and we'll glue this back section here and then take it back and get it stuck. And then we'll pull this forward, and then we'll glue it from here just to there. That way we can get it pulled forward and get it in the corner where we want it, and then glue it from here up. That does take a little longer, but it'll keep you from getting big old wrinkles and puckers and getting it riding up the side of the transmission tunnel or whatever. And you'll end up with a much better job in the end. You just got to take your time to get it to go in there right. So we got all of our sound deadening and heat shielding here put in place. It comes with the kit. And I got all the little studs in here for the lifted dots put in through that. Those are to be able to take the carpets out. So if they get wet or whatever, you can snap them out and dry them out. I think it's a good idea for serviceability of the car in the future to trim this around the remote cover for the transmission and then put this as a separate piece. That way you can actually take the screws out and take this off to be able to get the shifter out to pull the engine in the future without having to come in and cut that then. So just makes it a little bit nicer later if you're having to do any service on it. So after getting all this stuff in here, I did go ahead and get this piece in, and I went ahead and punched holes so we can get to the screws for service later. But I also decided to go ahead and put a little sound deadening just on top of the tunnel here because the carpet was ended up with a big pucker here, and that'll help level it out. So when you set that on there, it sets a little bit nicer now. You don't end up with that pucker here. And it does help soften this a little bit because this is not getting an armrest. So it will make this feel a little bit better when you do rest your arm on it if you're, sitting in the car or whatever. So when installing the carpet on the tunnel, there is an order which they got to go in there. You need to put the drive shaft tunnel stuff in first because this overlaps, the binding here overlaps this piece. But then the front piece overlaps this piece. So it means you got to start from the back, work your way forward to install them. Now in this particular case, this is how this carpet's been made for years, and I'm not happy with this. I don't like how this does this. Now I'm not 100% sure exactly how the factory did it because I'm not sure I've ever seen a factory piece of carpet in good enough condition to actually know how they did it. But we're contemplating adjusting that and maybe taking the things apart and re-sewing it, but we'll see what we end up doing. Some people will say you should start putting the carpet along the sills here because that's pretty much the hardest piece to put in, but I went ahead and started with the transmission tunnel. I think it's really kind of 6 one way, half dozen the other. One thing about putting this piece in here first is if you put this piece in, it almost gives you a little bit of practice with the glue and pushing the carpet down and getting it smooth here. If you get a wrinkle or two in this piece, it's not really going to matter. It's not the end of the world because once you put the seats in, you're just not going to see it as long as it's in the lower half. So I think it makes a good place to start there. And then I'm going to actually go back here and do this part next because we do have a rear carpet kit for this car. So we'll start with this piece and then this piece. That way we can tuck it up under here a little bit. And then once we put this piece in, it can tuck up under there, and this piece will help keep that piece from tucking, basically. So, but you just got to make sure that this is cut really nice around here because there's no rear panel here. As far as here, it can fold up the side a little bit, whatever, because that's going to be covered by an interior panel. So that's where I'm going to be going next, is these two pieces here. And then we can either do these next or this next. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I could do this one now even. But yeah, that's our next step. So now the hardest part about actually installing this piece here is really that this is curved and the piece of carpet is flat. So what I do is I go ahead and stick it to just to this part here, and I bend it around and figure out where it's going to curl and stuff. And I cut a line here and here, then put the top and bottom in there, and then I make the middle part fit to where it'll fit nice and tight to where you can make that seam disappear as much as you possibly can. And then glue it all up in stages. So you're actually gluing it in 4 stages. And then this piece here, you want to cut it just so it just is right at the edge of the cover here. The piece isn't even quite big enough to fully cover that flange anyway, but if you cover that flange underneath here, then when you cover the actual cover here and wrap it around, then there'll be too much thickness there and you won't be able to actually attach the Zeus fasteners. They won't turn and lock in because there'll be too much thickness there. But if you get that right at that edge there, and by the time this wraps around, you will not see a line there. And with that wrapped around, it'll hold everything down, nothing will fray and want to pop loose. All right, so that's that side there where it looks like with a better view of it. And I got this piece of carpet here ready to glue in. Now, the way this was cut, I've got very little room to work with for trimming this thing up or to try to get it to sit. So I'm working with what I got. So I got to go a happy medium here. It's not quite all the way against the bottom and not quite all the way against the top on this one side. And barely long enough here, but it was long enough on that end. It's just kind of the way things are these days. Now, these things are supposed to have a rubber seal that goes across here. Now, we don't actually have that seal for this car, and we're probably not going to go ahead and buy one. That is something that I can't remember the last time I worked on a car, on an MGA in my shop that actually had that seal in place. So I don't think it's that big of a problem to not have it in there. So we'll see. See how many details we have on all the other stuff and how deep we get into. And then I'll save that to the end to decide if I actually purchase one and put on there or not. And then I got this side here ready to start trimming and fitting. But I think that's about all we're going to be able to do for today, this video. And we'll catch you in the next one.